Breakfast on ABC Radio.
Now, fashion is responsible for between 2 and 8% of global greenhouse gas emissions, which is quite a lot. Really, one of the biggest issues with the industry is how much we produce and how much we consume and how much we send to landfill. So Australians, we consume about 15 kilograms of textiles each every year, and we're sending about 10 of those to landfill, which is an enormous problem.
And what does happen to the masses of clothing items that don't get sold in the Boxing Day sales? And you actually said that excess is really bad planning on the part of the industry.
Yeah, look, it is. It's a systemic issue within the fashion industry. So, you can just walk through any shopping centre and you'll see mountains of jeans and piles of T-shirts. And I work in this industry, so I understand what it takes to make each of those items. And so I find it very distressing when I see these huge piles of clothes. And that is really driving the heart of the industry's carbon footprint, because we produce too much and we don't wear enough of the clothes that we already own. And that means that we're ending up with unused textiles and aren't even being worn before they're getting kind of discarded. So a big retailer like David Jones, for example, has some programs. They'll donate a lot to a fabulous charity called Thread Together, who ensure that those clothes go to communities that need them. And they've done fabulous work around communities in Lismore who are flood affected. And really that's kind of like the ultimate that we would want to see these unused, unsold clothes going to. But they also will have a program with rental platforms, and also they'll donate things to the Red Cross. But the issue with donations, once we filter them down the line, is that we don't really know where they end up. Some of them will be sold in charity stores, but some of them do end up going to developing countries, and that's kind of worst case scenario.
But I mean, that's the end of the cycle. At the beginning of the cycle, are these stores just ordering incorrectly?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So something that happens is that, it's a bit of a guessing game. You produce a fabulous collection and you kind of think, what's going to happen? Who's going to buy it? What pieces will we invest in? And often they're predicting that we will buy more than we actually do, which is kind of happening across the board, which is why you're seeing so much textile waste. And what we need is better data, which we should have now because we all know how much data these companies are collecting on us all the time, and also different systems. So systems so that we kind of can predict more accurately what people actually want to have in their wardrobe. So it's not feasible for everyone, but if we shift to pre-order or made-to-order models, which is a radical change from where we're at now, then we'd be in a better situation, absolutely.
What about also the quality of the clothing item? Reflecting on it, Floyd from Near Orange says we need to be starting with quality products first if they're to be mended. Cheap furniture and fast fashion can't be reused.
Yeah, and he's right. I agree with you. We have a huge issue with the way that garments are made now. They're very, very cheap a lot of the time. And so garments that aren't made with their end of life in mind, it is much harder to repair them, because say a really well-made pair of pants will have an extra size in the seam, so that if you put on a little bit of weight after Christmas, you can let them out, you can have them tailored. But when you're looking at cheap clothes, they don't have any of those processes like built in. And, sometimes the fabric is very cheap, so it will stain easily or it will hold on to odours. And that's a real issue too, because no one obviously wants to wear a stained shirt.
Lucy-Anne Tonti is with us. She's the author of Sundress, Natural Fibres and Future of Fashion. I'm also wondering, are those skills falling by the wayside? Colette's on the line, and you teach sewing, Colette.
I do, Simon. Hi, how are you?
Good.
Good. Yeah, look, I had a small children's wear range, which I had for many years, selling in Sydney's East. And I had a shop in Bronte. And when people would come in and customers say over the years, what size should I get for my kid or my niece, nephew, whatever? And I'd say, look, if you get a size a little bit larger, they're only going to grow taller. Why don't you just take that hem up, make a tuck in that, or move a button or, move the elastic, and you'll get a longer life out of it. And the comment that I got for years and years from people was, I wish I had those skills. And I was just tapping my fingers and sort of had this idea planted in my head for many years to try and just wondering if I could start teaching sewing. So I got together with a friend and we tested it one night a week in the shop for a year in 2009. And this then I morphed my business into teaching sewing.
Wow.
And at the time, what I thought was that it would be mainly adults. What happened was the business grew to about 80% of the business being kids. And I think there's a lot to be said for getting kids into something that's mindful, away from computers, and creative, of course. And it's, it's a niche business, but it's a thriving business, little business. And I think even though I've moved premises and I'm sort of working from a pop-up shop now, I do lots of private classes in people's homes. I help. We don't get many boys, but we do get some. But just wonderful skills. So it's not just nanas and grandmas that are actually teaching the skills, even though I have 10 grandmas.
But where did you learn them from? Did you learn them because you were selling kids' clothes, or did you have a nana, a granny, or a grandpa that taught you?
No, I didn't actually. I just fell into it where I'd been travelling overseas as a late teenager in India and fell in love with textiles and had no idea what I was going to do with my life, and came back and went to TAFE. I'm a strong supporter of TAFE. Randwick TAFE at the time had a fashion school, and I fell into a fashion technology course where I learnt skills where I could look at someone after knowing nothing. After 2 years, I could look at a person, take their measurements, and draft a pattern, and actually sew something up and make it fit. Well, it's very technical skills, but those technical skills have become incredible, and I've had a long career. Started off working in theatre costumes, went on and ran a sewing magazine for kids' clothes, which was a technical magazine based on a Dutch publication. I've done a number of things, but I really love teaching. And there are some other places around in Sydney, and I'm sure around Australia, that are teaching sewing. And there's still a sort of weird stigma, I think, attached to sewing from the old days, when I think I've got a lot to say about people's attitudes that you don't need a brain to actually sew, because it's actually a very technically difficult thing when you're making clothes to fit. But fast fashion, as you were sort of talking about before, has a lot to blame for what's going on. But there's also some other wonderful areas to get into with the slow sewing, slow stitching, the Japanese approach to mending, which is called, they have borrow, or which is like hand stitching, but a lot of people find it very meditative and very therapeutic. So there's some really wonderful benefits.
Well done, Colette. That's got to be music to your ears, Lucy-Anne.
Oh, it really is. And I mean, it's such a valuable skill, and it's something that people really, I think, we're really facing this crisis in Australia, especially in the garment industry, where we're losing the skills because all of the manufacturing is going offshore, and we don't have enough young people coming through picking them up. So there's a real movement now from within the industry to encourage people to, do these, take these courses and learn these skills, because otherwise we're not going to be able to make anything here. So I absolutely love hearing this community-led approach. It's absolutely fabulous.
And Colette was saying that she doesn't get many boys or men taking the sewing courses. She gets some, but your brother carries a sewing kit in his glove box.
He does. Well, although he didn't sew on the button onto his pants himself, it was his girlfriend that did. But yeah, he's a very practical person, and he said to me when I asked him that he's been carrying a sewing kit for years. So it does go both ways, and it is, it's a growing area amongst young men as well, because it's all across the board that there's a group of Gen Zs who love Depop and TikTok who are adopting something called thrift flipping, where they will go to op shops and buy secondhand clothes and then, completely remodel them into new outfits and put it online. So there is movement happening and a real fascination with these concepts. We're just seeing them at the beginning now, which is really heartening.
Lucy-Anne, we can avoid that extra cost by creating our own sewing kit.
We can, absolutely. Although I will say there's something to be said for investing in that kind of service economy, because it is important. It builds communities, having our local tailor and our shoemaker and giving them business. You can feel really good about that because we need them. But yeah, if you want to be able to do it at home, taking a course like we just heard described, or building your own sewing kit is a really good place to start. Have you got a sewing kit, Simon?
I know there is one in the house. Whether it's mine...
Well, look, you're a step ahead of me because I don't have my own my own sewing kit, but I have spoken to some experts who have given me advice on where I should start when I'm looking to build one. And actually, the most important thing they've told me is a really good pair of scissors. That's your first purchase.
And sharp scissors.
Yes, exactly. That only get used for cutting fabric, that you can re-sharpen yourself. So they're like something that you're going to hold on to for life, which is, I think, a really lovely idea as well. And then we need needles, some thread. You want to make sure the thread matches up with kind of the color palette of your wardrobe and that it's good quality thread. The other advice I was given was to look for vintage things because they're often not plastic and they're really fabulous tools to use, or to go to a proper haberdashery shop. So don't be creating your sewing kit at the supermarket because you want the tools and the threads and everything that you've got in there to be of a really high quality.
You're listening to Breakfast on ABC Radio.